If your enemy is of a choleric temper, seek to irritate him by invading his country. Then, after 2 decades of irritating him, pull out your forces and leave behind thousands of weapons and vehicles and aircraft so that your enemy can use them against you. Once your troops are out of the way and your enemy has completely retaken the country, then begin evacuating civilians, making them easy targets for your enemy. In doing this, you will confuse your enemy with your supreme stupidity. Wow. That Sun Tzu really was a master of military strategy. At least a dozen U.S. troops and several dozen Afghan civilians were killed today when ISIS suicide bombers and gunmen stormed the gates of Kabul airport. But President Joe Biden comforted the world with these words.
A tough day.
It sure was, Mr. President. Reuters reports, suicide bombers struck the crowded gates of Kabul airport with at least 2 explosions on Thursday, causing a bloodbath among civilians and U.S. troops and bringing a catastrophic halt to the airlift of tens of thousands of Afghans desperate to flee. 2 U.S. officials put the U.S. death toll at 12 service members killed, making it one of the deadliest incidents for American troops of the entire 20-year war. No U.S. troops were killed in Afghanistan for the past 18 months. Before today, the last time U.S. soldiers were killed in Afghanistan was February 8th of 2020. But at least a dozen were killed today, and the deadline for withdrawal is still several days away, so the bloodbath might not be finished just yet. There was no complete toll of Afghan civilians, but video images uploaded by Afghan journalists showed dozens of bodies of people killed in packed crowds outside the airport. A watery ditch by the airport fence was filled with blood-soaked corpses, some being fished out and laid in heaps on the canal side, while wailing civilians searched for loved ones. Think about the level of rage here. U.S. troops were leaving. The people who helped them were trying to leave. But jihadis couldn't let them go. They would rather blow themselves up and kill as many as possible than let them leave. Several Western countries said the airlift of civilians was now effectively over, with the United States having sealed the gates of the airport, leaving no way out for tens of thousands of Afghans who worked for the West through 2 decades of war. The most terrifying words an Afghan who helped Western nations could ever hear. No way out. A Taliban official said at least 13 people, including children, had been killed in the attack and 52 were wounded, though it was clear from video footage that those figures were far from complete. One surgical hospital run by an Italian charity said it alone was treating more than 60 wounded. The explosions took place amid the crowds outside the airport who have been massing for days in hope of escaping in an airlift which the United States says will end by Tuesday, following the swift capture of the country by the Taliban. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the blasts, but U.S. officials pointed the finger at Islamic State's Afghan affiliate, ISIS Khorasan, which has emerged as enemies of both the West and of the Taliban. ISIS wants to return to its glory days of a few years ago. When you're the most popular terrorist group, you generally get the most new recruits. And what better way to get a ton of attention than by attacking the U.S. military as it withdraws? ISIS will use this attack to paint themselves as strong and the Taliban as weak, and eventually try to carve out a portion of Afghanistan for themselves. A witness who gave his name as Jamshid said he went to the airport in the hope of getting a visa for the United States. There was a very strong and powerful suicide attack in the middle of the people. Many were killed, including Americans, he said. Zubair, a 24-year-old civil engineer who had been trying for nearly a week to get inside the airport with a cousin who had papers authorizing him to travel to the United States, said he was 50 meters from the first of 2 suicide bombers who detonated explosives at the gate. Men, women, and children were screaming, I saw many injured people, men, women, and children, being loaded into private vehicles and taken toward the hospitals, he said. After the explosions, there was gunfire. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said on Twitter, "We can confirm that the explosion at the Abbey Gate was the result of a complex attack that resulted in a number of U.S. and civilian casualties. We can also confirm at least one other explosion at or near the Baron Hotel, a short distance from Abbey Gate." Taliban official Suhail Shaheen said there were 2 explosions in a crowded area managed by U.S. forces. "We strongly condemn this gruesome incident and will take every step to bring the culprits to justice." So the Taliban is saying that they're going to bring the ISIS jihadis who just launched a terrorist attack to justice. Now, this is interesting. For the past 2 weeks, the Taliban has been waging what we might call charm jihad. They're trying to show the world that they can function like a normal government. They're claiming that they respect human rights. They're claiming that they're not going to terrorize the population of Afghanistan, not even the Afghans who fought against them. They've magically become civilized. But ISIS jihadis are going on a killing spree, and this puts the Taliban in quite a dilemma. If the Taliban punishes ISIS jihadis for killing U.S. troops and their allies, ISIS will accuse the Taliban of siding with the U.S. and their allies against Muslims. And that's not going to go well for the Taliban. If, on the other hand, the Taliban doesn't punish ISIS jihadis for killing U.S. troops and their allies, the rest of the world will look at them and conclude that they don't really have a problem with terrorist attacks and that they're not the civilized leaders they claim to be. Their charm jihad will fail. So, the choice that lies before the Taliban right now is go against ISIS and look like you're siding with the West against Muslims, or let ISIS slide and look like you're the terrorists we all know you are. Either way, the Taliban loses. But that's just what happens when the fundamental tactic of your ideology is terror, and your sources are so hopelessly confusing and contradictory that you end up with a bunch of different groups attacking each other. I wonder what Sun Tzu would think about this.